Gareth, great to see you. Thank you so much for giving us your time. One day back, and it seems you've been quite busy already with one or two withdrawals. First of all, this afternoon, Adam Lallana, what's happened there?
Yeah, he's just picked up a muscular injury quite close to the beginning of training, so it's the worst thing as far as we're concerned, because you never want to send players back injured. Adam's had such a difficult run personally, and is a player we think so much of, as I know Jurgen does. So at the moment he's having a really difficult run, and you review what we might have been able to do differently, but today was just really out of the blue. So yeah, I'm really disappointed for him, because he's had such a tough year, missing so much football, and hopefully he can be back strong as quickly as possible.
Does it seem quite serious then, the injury?
Well, that has to be assessed. That's still to be scanned properly and assessed. But for certain, he's out of our 2 games, and it was more important for him to go back now and see everybody at Liverpool and see what's what.
Will you look to cover him then?
Well, we're just talking that through. I mean, we feel that the squad we've got is nice and tight. So we've got the game Saturday. All being well, if the under-21s do well on Thursday, they're pretty much qualified, and we can think about a couple of them. And for training, our under-19s and under-20s are here, so it's a good opportunity for us to involve some of those younger players with our squad.
But I understand you have called up another goalkeeper today, in Marcus Bettinelli.
Yeah, again, you know, all of our goalkeepers have been modified in one way or another with their training, so we felt it was useful to bring another goalkeeper in for training. And Marcus is another player we've worked with the under-21s in the past. We obviously have a situation in the Premier League at the moment where there aren't many English goalkeepers playing. Marcus, very comfortable with the ball at his feet. You know, he fits that modern prototype of goalkeeper. And you know, no point in us calling up a more senior keeper who's worked with us in the past just for training and to have a look at. So it's a good opportunity for Marcus.
So having lost Raheem Sterling and lost Adam Lallana today, if you don't call someone else up, it might appear from the outside that that's a reluctance to do that. Mm-hmm. Why would that be?
Well, we think we've got a strong squad. We're 3 games into a new season, and we looked through a lot of different players over the last couple of years and decided that because of the way we want to play and the way that the type of players we want to work with, that there are some guys that didn't fit that model. And so now we're into a fresh cycle of probably not going back to players that have been in before and that we've had a good look at. So the next group that we start to look at are probably coming through our younger age groups. There's a couple of others that are still young, that are still you know, have room for growth. The Chalobahs, the Will Hugheses, the Ross Barkleys, but I don't want to bring them in now. You know, 3 days into the camp. I'd rather do that when we feel they're ready, we feel that we're looking at them on merit, and also we really like some of the age groups below, and I think they're quite likely to be the guys that push. But when you're promoting young players, you've got to be really careful about how quickly you do that, because you want to give them game time, you want to bring them in, have them train and adapt to the training, but also be able to give them game time. Otherwise, 3 or 4 squads down the line, it isn't quite as fresh, it isn't quite as unique. And I think that's happened a little bit with a couple in the past who then coming with England is a little bit of a negative for them if they don't get on the pitch.
So is that to say then that players who from the outside appear to have started the Premier League season well, Callum Wilson who's 26, mm-hmm. Troy Deeney who's 30, are not going to get a look in?
I think Callum is another player we work with the under-21s, and so we know a lot about Callum. He's certainly one we have to keep monitoring. I think Troy is a player who really suits the way that Watford play, and I'm a big fan of his. I think what he brings to their team and the way that he leads their team in the way that they play and in the games they have. But I think we play slightly differently, and I think that for me, the next forward players that I see that should be challenging are some of the younger ones.
On Raheem Sterling particularly, he started the season really well in the Premier League. How much of a disappointment was it to lose him, and how did that come about in terms of the conversations that you might have had with him?
Well, in terms of the pull-out, he's got a back injury, so that's pretty straightforward. But in terms of what do we miss, for us, he was fundamental to the style of play in the summer. And I know there's a lot of talk about whether that's his best position, and he's playing off the left this season, but he wasn't playing off the left last season. So for me, Raheem is very interchangeable, very fluid in the positions he can play. He loves playing through the middle with us. So the big thing for Raheem is to score, is to start scoring internationally. It's as simple as that. I think had he added goals to his performances in the summer, everybody would have been really clear on what his value was for the team. I think we were very clear. I know lots of coaches I spoke to, lots of ex-players I spoke to were also very clear on what he added to the team. His teammates were, all of the staff were. So, from our perspective, we're just desperate for him to get that goal, because we can see him doing it for club. And he's just got to probably feel the freedom of doing that a couple of times with England, and then he'll be off and running.
So you have this incredible journey in the summer, which we all were thrilled along with you, watching from afar. Then you have this 2 months where you don't see the players and you're back together now. But does it feel like the feel-good factor is still there amongst the group?
Oh, very much so. I think difficult for them because they had a short break, back in with their club, then back into England, and that's quite a quick turnaround. So where their motivation and head is always interesting when they come into camp, but to a man, they're delighted to get together again. They've shared an incredible experience through the summer, so to share the stories, to get back with that group. We have a very tight-knit group, not only at the senior end, but the junior teams as well, because they're all used to being here at St George's at the same time. So I think they genuinely look forward to coming with England now, which is brilliant. That's what we wanted to create. And the next thing is to slowly turn the motivation towards the games. And I think it's right that they feel the warmth from the summer. I think it's right that they enjoy that. We haven't had too many tournaments where they've been able to feel that. So I wanted them to feel that. And I think they know that we're in a position where we had a good outcome in the summer, but we're not at the top echelon of teams yet. So there's work to do, and there's improvement that can be made, and they're hungry to do that individually, and they're hungry to do that as a collective.
And here we are at St George's, and you see the history all around us. There's Sir Alf Ramsey and Sir Bobby Robson over there. One of 3 England managers to take us to a World Cup semi-final, and just 22 minutes away from a World Cup final. And when you hear that sentence, Gareth, does it fill you with pride, or is there regret there?
Not so much regret. There's obvious thinking about how we might have changed things, how we might have done things differently. But I think we knew where we were as a team when we were coming into the finals. So we can't dismiss all the good decisions we made and the way that we played, and only think about the 20 minutes that might have been different, or the 45 minutes that might have been different. And I don't buy that we had an easier route. We probably had a more straightforward quarter-final than we might have done. I think we've always had similar sorts of fixtures down the years in the lead up to that. So for the players in particular, I think what they achieved, given their lack of international experience and their lack of years, was an incredible achievement by them. And I think it's one of those things that at the time was huge. Then you get a period of it being slightly dismissed, and probably in 15 years' time, everybody will look back again and say, wow, do you remember that summer? And so very special for everybody, but we're not sitting patting ourselves on the back. We came back from there with a very realistic idea of where we sit. Brilliant experience, so much better for going through those big games and breaking through some barriers of first knockout win and first penalty shootout win and first quarter-final win for such a long time. So they were significant moments, not just for this team, but for future teams that play for England.
But I'm sure you've watched the semi-final back countless times. How many times would you admit to?
Yeah, in whole probably 4 or 5, and then different parts of it you're always looking, especially tactically, because our system provided us with so many strengths, but also there were things that we didn't do so well in not just the semi-final, in some of the other games. Well, we were less brave to take the ball when we'd gone ahead. And by the way, it's easy for me to sit there and tell the lads to keep playing as we've been playing and to stick to the philosophy, because we've only been working that way and in that system for 6 matches going into the finals. And it's a lot easier to say that than it is to be in the middle of a World Cup semi-final doing it. So it was clear to us that we stopped being quite as brave in showing for the ball, which meant we ended up going longer, which meant we ended up turning possession over. And within our system, in any system there are slight weaknesses. Without the ball, we've got to think about maybe pressing differently to fill some of the gaps. So we were in a bit of a cycle of losing the ball too cheaply, first and biggest problem, and then having too much space and running to cover the gaps.
So does the system stay the same? Are you set on that?
Yeah, we think that the tactical formation actually has brought us so many options for the strengths that we have, and has possibly hidden some of the weaknesses we have. So, but within that system, we can change how we play and where we press, and the solutions in our build-up as well, because we know we want to create more chances from open play, and profile of some of the players maybe as well can do that.
So in terms of taking that next step, and you talked about us not being a top 4 team after the World Cup, do we have the players within that system to achieve that, or is something fundamental going to have to change?
Well, we have a challenge in that there's no doubt in our mind that bar probably Adam Lallana, Alex Oxlade, we probably had our best players for the way we want to play with us. So we've got to continue to improve those guys, and at the age they are, they will improve, and they've got the desire to improve. So that's number one. But if we're looking at the size of the pool of talent and what's coming through, and this is a concern not just for us over the next couple of years, but for England 4, 6, 8 years down the line, then we have to be concerned that our world champion under-18s, our world champion under-20s, and where they're going to play their football, because to really push to get into the team and to get the experiences they need to both be comfortable in international football but also competing and beating the very best, then they need to be in high-level matches and dealing with that pressure and that intensity of game.
That must have been a huge frustration for you, Gareth, after everything that happened in the summer. We see the kick-off of a Premier League season. Bournemouth, for example, can't get Lewis Cook in their side right now. Dominic Solanke not getting much game time at Liverpool. Ruben Loftus-Cheek going back to Chelsea and not playing. How frustrating is that for you when you do want to take that next step?
Well, there is a frustration, but also I've known that for 4 or 5 years. You know, I've been working with our youth department for 4 or 5 years, and those statistics have been slowly declining. Why did I raise it last week? Because I think if you raise it when things aren't going so well, then it's an excuse and you're looking for time to develop things. But the fact is, we're on the back of a seniors semi-final, a 20s World Cup win, a 17s World Cup win, a 19s Euros last year. So the point I raise isn't for me for the next 2 years, it's because the Foden, Sancho, Sessegnon group, they're going to be really maturing in 4, 6, 8 years. It's going to be another England manager. It will be another generation, if you like. What I don't want is everybody to say, blimey, where have all those guys gone, and where is English football? We'll be having another review of everything we do, and we don't need to review everything we do. There's been times in the past where we've done that, but there's lots of good coaching going on. There's lots of talented boys coming through. There's technically gifted players that for years we talked about, oh, we haven't got players that are technically gifted, but we're seeing those come through. So we're just this missing piece of, if you're in a smaller country, smaller league, Croatia as an example, I remember speaking to Slaven Bilic and him saying the clubs don't have any money, so they have to play young players, and then they look to sell them and move them on. But it means that the players get into the league at a very young age and they're used to playing under pressure and playing in front of crowds, and that's the concern for me, that we've got some really proven at youth level players that have now got to make that next step.
So the Nations League, starting with Spain on Saturday, what do you hope to achieve through these matches?
Well, first and foremost, we want to build on the positivity around the team. You know, it's a long time since we had this connection with the fans, and that's, I think, a genuine warmth for this group of players in particular, the way they, not only the way they played, but the way they represented their country. And I think people can see the humility in the group, and that they've got a desire to get better, and a real pride in wearing the shirt. And I know for the man in the street and the woman in the street, the pride in the shirt, the singing the anthem, the going over to the fans at the end, sometimes they seem small things to players and staff, but actually they're really hugely important, especially when you're representing a country. So I think those things were in evidence, and I think they like the style that we're trying to develop. They can see a style of play with the team as well. So now our next challenge is to start to beat some of these really top teams, so that in 2 years we're not going in underdogs and nobody really having expectations, that we're going in with a record, a bit like when England won the Rugby World Cup in 2003. They were #1 in the world, so they were going in with belief, with confidence, and that's what we would hope to be in 2 years' time.
That's your goal, is it? How confident are you that in 2 years' time you're going in with an England team that you think has a realistic chance of winning it?
Well, that's got to be what we aim for. You know, that's. I mean, we have 20 matches in that period of time, so that's how quickly you have to turn things around. A 2-year period, but 20 matches, 10 camps, 10 training camps. So that's why we've got to make sure that we invest in the right players, the players that we think can take the team forward, that we give them the experiences they need, so that even now, over these next couple of games, we're learning something from every game that we play, and we're learning about the players.
Final thought, I'm not sure you'd have been used to all the adulation, the attention that's come your way.
Certainly not, no.
How's life changed for you since the World Cup?
Yeah, it has changed a lot. Not in terms of how I am and how things are at home. You know, I'm still just below the dogs in terms of the pecking order in the house.
I know that
so
feeling.
That's absolutely fine. But of course, publicly, and by the way, in a really nice way, you know, the people, everybody coming up, it's great that we've been able to have such a positive impact on English football, but also England. You know, I think a summer where everybody was a bit fed up of Brexit and all the discussions and debates and trials and tribulations, and I think people saw the identity of the team. I think the tremendous summer in terms of weather and people coming together, you know, it reminds me that international football is important to people. I think we just wanted to dismiss it because we've been hurt, and people want to get together and be proud of being English, and being English isn't just, you know, the old school of, you know, my granddad who fought in the war, and it's lots of different cultures and religions, and modern England is very different, and I think people saw some of that in the team, and saw that actually a young team could be successful, and I think what's happened with our junior teams has really resonated as well. So we all want hope and we all want things to look forward to, and I think for me it was great to be able to have that, be a part of that and have an effect on a bigger picture.
Thanks for your time, Gareth. We wish you well.
Thank you.